These films will show you the steps to be followed in setting up and adjusting your equipment for MIG welding and the basic techniques for flat, horizontal, vertical, and overhead welding. This is only the start toward your becoming a skilled welder. How far and how quickly you progress hereafter depends on two things: how well you grasp the fundamentals and how much you practice. Before you strike your first welding arc, there are several publications that are required reading for every good welder. The first is any of the many available booklets on safety in welding. Learn the safety rules and make them part of your daily work habits. The second is the operating instructions for the equipment you will be using. Become thoroughly familiar with the equipment and operate it strictly according to the manufacturer's instructions. Before we begin to set up some typical MIG equipment, let's take a close look at the two arcs used in MIG welding, the short arc and spray arc. In short arc welding, the power supply is usually connected to steep slope. There'll be more about this later. These pictures were taken in slow motion to allow us to look into the arc and see how it works. As this shows, in short arc welding, the arc actually shorts out as the electrode or wire touches the workpiece, and then reignites when a small length of wire melts off. The sequence occurs from 60 to 200 times per second, depending on wire size and the settings of the equipment controls. Since the arc is only on for a portion of the time, relatively little heat is generated. This makes short arc ideal for welding light gauge sheet steel where too much heat would damage the metal, and for out of position welding where close control of the weld puddle is required. In spray arc welding, a flat slope is usually used, and the arc is on continuously. If you look closely, you can actually see droplets of metal being propelled from the wire to the plate. Up to 200 drops per second are transferred, with the drops following each other, not in a spray pattern as the name implies. The greater heat generated by the spray arc makes it faster to use when welding heavier thicknesses of metal. Now that you've seen the two arcs you'll be using, let's set up the equipment for MIG welding. Here you see some of the typical tools of the trade: cylinders of shielding gas, gas regulator, power supply, and wire feeder. Before connecting the gas supply, stand to one side and quickly open and close the cylinder valve to blow dirt or dust from the valve seat. As in all equipment installations, safety is a prime consideration, and it's just good sense to wear safety glasses at all times. The type of shielding gas used will depend largely on whether you do spray arc or short arc welding. Next, connect your regulator to the cylinder and the gas supply hose to the wire feeder. Tighten all connections securely, but never use undue force. Connections may vary slightly from one machine to another. Here, the gas supply connection is at the rear of the wire feeder. Plug the wire feeder control cable into the power supply. The welding wire used depends on the application. Wires are identified on the packaging. This carton contains a 35-pound spool. After making sure that the electrical input to the power supply is off, position the wire spool on the spindle and adjust the tension device so that the spool just coasts. Free the end of the wire from the spool and lead it through the drive system of the wire feeder. To drive the wire, a hardened steel grooved feed roll of the proper size is installed and locked in place on the drive shaft of the wire feeder. The feed roll size is usually stamped on the roll. Place the pressure roll in position on top of the feed roll and adjust the pressure while feeding wire. Press lightly on the spool to see if the wire slips into the drive roll. If it does, increase the pressure on the wire until you get a smooth, positive feed. The torch we will use is a lightweight, air-cooled model rated for 250 amperes in continuous use. Always select a torch that handles easily and is comfortable to use. It'll pay off on long welds. Connect the torch to the shielding gas and welding current connections on the wire feeder, and connect the torch switch cord for on-off control of the welding. The power cable nut is grooved to tell you that the connection is left-hand threaded. Your gas flow is automatically turned on or off by a solenoid valve in the wire feeder. Select the correct size conduit for the wire diameter being used and lock it in place in the torch handle. The conduit guides the wire from the feeder to the torch and protects it from contaminants. Slip and insert with the right inside diameter for the wire into the outlet wire guide and screw the guide into the end of the conduit. Use the inch switch to slowly feed about a foot of wire. This way the wire is cold without the welding current on, which would create a hazard. Start your wire into the conduit. Then position the outlet guide in the wire feeder with the insert tip as close to the feed rolls as you can get it without it rubbing. Inch the wire through the conduit and torch, being careful to keep the torch pointed away from you, since the point of the wire is sharp and can puncture the skin. Install the contact tube, which transmits the welding current to the wire, and a nozzle which shapes the shielding gas flow, and the torch is ready to go. Now that the torch and wire feeder are set up, let's connect to the welding power and set our welding conditions. Start by making sure that the main input power is off. Then clamp the ground cable to the work table and attach the other end of the cable to the negative or minus terminal of the power supply. This hookup gives DC reverse polarity, normal for MIG welding. Connect the power cable from the wire feeder to the positive or plus terminal. This particular power supply allows connection for either steep or flat slope. Be sure your connections are tight for good conductivity. With the main power on and the pressure roll released so that wire won't feed when you close the torch switch, place the line switch on the supply in ready. The supply's cooling fan will start and the circuit is ready for welding. Open the regulator valve and close the torch switch to get gas flow through the torch, causing the float to rise. Remember at this point that, though not feeding, the wire is energized. Be careful not to touch it or ground it on a metal object. Set the flow meter for the gas flow rate recommended in the tables of welding conditions, which you should refer to for all starting settings. The table of welding conditions tells us that we will be working in the low voltage range. Again, close the torch switch and set your pre-selected voltage by watching the voltmeter. Next, set the selected value of inductance using this control. All that remains is to replace the pressure roll so that wire will feed and your outfit is ready for welding.